shopgear.com.
The following is a presentation of the Gear Radio Network. You're listening to the Better Live Than Dead podcast on the Gear Radio Network.
And with that being said, Better Live Than Dead, the podcast, we welcome you to the year 2020, powered by BetterLiveThanDead.com and the Gear Radio Network. This is episode 161.
161. Moving right along. I like it.
I am Ryan Wolfe at Wolfe BLTD, joined on the IndyCar Media Hotline by Mr. Perez at MRLG Perez. And as mentioned, this is episode 161, NFL Week 17 cast. You can hear us on BetterLiveThanDead.com, Apple Podcasts, Bullhorn, Google Play Music, iHeartRadio, Pandora, Spotify, YouTube, and wherever else you listen to podcasts. Also, the big news dropping within the last week. We are now on the radio.com app, people. John Cimino, the president, CEO, everything, man, for Gear Network has done a damn good job. As we talked about last week on Trust the Podcast, got us on the radio.com app. We're making moves, Lewis. Like I said before the podcast, I'll say it again, though. Happy New Year to you. How you doing, man?
Hey, man, Happy New Year to you. For the folks listening at home, this is January 1st, 2020. I'm doing good, man. Looking forward to this new year. You know, got some things happening, so I'm excited going into this new year. How about you, bro?
I agree with you on that one. I mean, and like I said, too, Happy New Year to everybody listening. We appreciate you always tuning in and staying loyal to the podcast here. 2020 is going to be interesting. You know, it's a new decade. It's I feel like it's the first decade that I'm actually kind of like woke. You know, I'm an adult now. I've got to pay bills and stuff. You know, it's kind of like I'm starting to get my life together and figure out which direction I'm heading in. But you know, I used to be a big, you know, New Year's resolutions, New Year, new me type of stuff. I'm not like that. I'm, you know, I'll wake up on a Monday and say, you know what, this is the week I'm going to do something different. But hey, for everyone out there that's doing the New Year, new me, you know, 2020, I'm going to turn things around. I wish you the best of luck. You definitely, whatever it is you're trying to do, stick with it and kick its ass in the new year.
That's right. Yeah, good luck with that if you're going to do the New Year, new me. I'm going to do the New Year, same me, just doing.
I mean, I haven't gone to the gym for, I would say like 3 months because I kept hurting my back, kept messing up my sciatic nerve. And I was like, you know what? Holiday season's here. I'm just going to ride it through. And it's been a little bit of a bumpy ride in terms of gaining a few pounds, not feeling too great about that. But you know what? I held myself accountable and said, you know what? The new year's starting. That's my Monday. I'm going to start sometime around January 1st. Not today. Obviously I'm not doing anything today because I'm podcasting and I'm still feeling kind of sick. I still got this cold I'm working with, so I don't really want to die. But you know, it's something where you just hold yourself accountable. That's what I'm doing, and it's going to be fun.
Yeah, no, listen, I same thing. I haven't been to the gym in a couple months, and you know, I had that really good transformation last year. I dropped about 60 pounds. I've put a little bit back on. Not a ton, but a little bit, and I'm ready to get back into it. You know, my wife is actually about to go to the gym herself, so she's always grinding.
Absolutely. My wife's the same way. She's been working out for, I think, like 75 plus days. She's doing one of those beach body workouts. It's impressive. I mean, I can't seem to keep myself on track there, but you know, I'm working on it. It's a struggle, but it's a positive struggle. It's a struggle in the right direction.
We'll get there. You know, like I haven't had soda in over a year now. Well, I haven't had soda since last January. And I was thinking to myself, at the stroke of midnight, I might have a Coke just because it'll been a year since I've had it, you know, haven't had any. And the only Coke, the place I had where I was at last night, that my sister-in-law's house, the only Coke they had was vanilla Coke. And if I'm going to break my streak, I want it to be with some like real Coke.
Look I haven't drank soda. Like I haven't bought a bottle of soda in eons, but the only time I have any soda, and it's on a rare occasion, is if I'm drinking like a mixed drink or something, you know?
Right.
Like,
see, I haven't even done that. Like Coke and rum was my stuff. I used to love Coke and rum. I just drink my rum straight up now with a little ice.
You're more of a man than I am, that's for sure. Well, hey, you know, it was nice. We had a little bit of a project transformation podcast going on there. That's nice. I like
that'll
that.
be coming back soon too.
Hell yeah. Let's jump over to football now. There's a lot going on. First off, and our three big things brought to you by fortunephoto.com. Week 17, Lewis, in the books. The playoffs are upon us, but we got to take a quick look back just to see where things were and how they ended up and how they finished in the regular season, as well as how the playoff picture looks now. So we'll start week 17, talk about some playoffs, talk about some stats. Then we'll look at the postseason and how we see it shaking out. First off, week 17 rewind. Miami defeats Miami defeats the New England Patriots. I believe it was 27-24. I put 24-24. I know that's wrong. Clearly, we don't have a very good editing staff. That would be my fault. Let me take a quick look here.
It was 27-24.
Yeah, 27-24. Okay, perfect. Yeah, so 27-24. The Dolphins stunned the Patriots, forcing the Patriots to play forcing them to play on Wild Card Weekend for the first time in a decade. Ryan Fitzpatrick, Miami's quarterback, 28 of 41, 320 yards, 1 touchdown with 5 rushes for 15 yards and a touchdown. Surprisingly, it's surprising and weird to see the Patriots needing to play on Wild Card Weekend. But hey, you know what? It's kind of what their season has been like. You know, they started off real hot, kind of fell back to earth, and they're just at this point, I guess, just kind of mediocre.
Yeah, they are pretty much mediocre at this point, but they got a lot of injuries. You know, I mean, and as much as we've been talking about how Tom Brady's been playing and his stats have been still really high, he hasn't been playing as well as he normally does. But it is weird to see them in the wild card. And actually, I like it because that may mean that they, won't make the Super Bowl this year. And
historically, yeah, if they play the wild card, they don't make the Super Bowl. That's just how it works for them. They get the first round bye, they go to the Super Bowl. It's almost like clockwork.
Well, exactly. And so I'm cool with this because that means they're not going to be there. And that's what I like to see.
You see if there's a stat. I didn't look this up, but I'll look it up right now. I don't know if there's like a tweet or a stat or something. I can't find it fast enough, so I don't care that much. But either way, we'll talk about that here in just a few minutes about the playoffs. Looking over now to Atlanta, man. What a game that was. First off, Atlanta announced earlier this week that head coach Dan Quinn and GM Thomas Dimitroff will be back in 2020. At this point, it looks like, me personally, I didn't think that was a great move because there's something to be said about how the team started off the season. They were like, 1-7 or 1-6 or something crazy like that. Turned things around and finished with a pretty respectable record despite the fact that they missed the playoffs. But I think that they're probably on their last of their 9 lives at this point in time, because honestly, Atlanta hasn't been the same since they blew that 28-3 lead in the Super Bowl. And rightfully so. Those are things that blow up franchises and alter the course of a franchise's history. But Atlanta has stuck the course. They have an incredible offense. They've got Julio Jones. They've got Calvin Ridley, quite possibly the best duo or one of the best duos in the NFL in terms of wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2. You've got Devonta Freeman. You've got Austin Hooper. Like I said, Matt Ryan. I don't know what they're doing wrong there, but they're clearly doing something wrong. But it seems like they've got it figured out. Dan Quinn they had Raheem Morris, the old Buccaneers coach, swapped over to defense. He switched over to defense and became the defensive coordinator after the season. He's been calling defensive plays the past few weeks, I believe, and that's also helped that turnaround too. So I don't know what Atlanta's going to do from here, but they're sticking the course, and good for them.
It may work out for them. They like you said, they turned it around in the second half of the season, and they started to look like a good football team. And they do have a ton of weapons. So it'll be exciting to see where they go. I like when Atlanta's good. It's a team you don't hear a ton about for some reason.
They're always fun to watch when they're good.
Right, exactly. I feel like any team is fun to watch when they're good. Although, you know what? There's some there's some teams that are fun to watch when they're terrible.
Well, I guess let me rephrase that. The style of football they play, it's fun to watch when it works. Right. I remember watching them earlier in the season where you're like, oh man, the Falcons are on TV. It's going to be interesting to watch to see how they do. And then they just crapped all over themselves, and you're like, oh, that was real bad. Because I guess for me, it seems like when they're going well, they're great. When they're going bad, it's ugly.
It's ugly.
Now, speaking of ugly, Lewis, we're going to talk a lot about this man in the offseason. Quarterback Jameis Winston of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He becomes the first NFL quarterback to join the 30-30 club. Now, if you don't know what that is, I'll be more than happy to tell you. 30 touchdown passes and 30 interceptions in the same season. The good and the bad, all wrapped up in one. He secured history with a walk-off pick six in overtime. The most Jameis Winston way to end the season, a walk-off pick six in overtime.
yeah, that is a very Jameis Winston way to do it. That's a good way to put it. It's kind of crazy to think that he threw that many interceptions in a season while still throwing that many touchdowns. I mean,
it's crazy too because they aren't horrible. The Buccaneers aren't horrible. Again, right. Much like the Falcons, they have a lot of
they have a lot of upside.
They have a lot of upside. I'm sorry, I'm just reading some things here on Twitter, which I'm going to take a quick note and put this aside here real fast for later on in the podcast. Also, we've got some Bills-Texans trash talk. I love that very much, so we'll talk about that in just a moment. I'm sorry there for getting distracted, but Tampa Bay has a lot of offensive talent. With that being said, they have to find, whether or not it's Jameis Winston, they have to find a quarterback who can make better decisions.
That's a true story.
And maybe instead of playing hero ball sometimes, know when to take a sack instead of throwing it up for a potential interception. Again, though, with that being said, I don't know. I think Jameis Winston is probably still the guy for Tampa. I don't know who. Maybe they go out and draft their own guy. They go draft someone else and try that again. But I can't see Jameis Winston getting. I mean, there's talks that he might be asking for like $30 million, jokingly $1 million for every interception that he had. But excuse me, I think that if Tampa doesn't approach him, what'll end up happening is he'll probably go to market and overvalue himself, and he'll either come back to Tampa or someone will overpay massively for him. But it does seem like in this day and age now where quarterbacks are making so much money, it really does seem to me as if teams aren't afraid to say, you know what, you want $30 million, we'll go find somebody else.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's an absolute true story. That there's a ton of people, there's a ton of talent out there when it comes to the quarterback position. And I believe Jameis Winston's young enough, at this point where he could turn it around. He just needs the I don't know what he needs to do. Maybe get out of his own head. Make better decisions, like you said. He's young enough to where that could be taught. But I don't know if he wants to be taught that.
I just don't know if you can if you can break those
habits.
If you can break those habits, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it seems like it's one of those situations where at this point in time, I just don't know. I mean, I don't know if that's something that he can get around. And with that being said, I don't know if it's enough. I mean, if anybody can do it, it's going to be Bruce Arians. He seems like he knows what he wants and how he wants it in his offense. I mean, and at this point, if he doesn't think Jameis Winston's the guy, which he seems to still have some expectation that Jameis Winston can be the guy, he'll be the first one to move on. I don't have any doubt there. But I don't know where else who would want to take a shot on Jameis Winston if he wants a ton of cash. So again, he'll be someone we'll talk about probably ad nauseum throughout the offseason here.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens with him. I don't think he's going to be worth what he's going to ask, but hey, we'll see.
Now, looking ahead here, looking at New Orleans and Carolina. New Orleans defeats Carolina 42-10. No big deal there. The big story out of the game, though. Carolina running back Christian McCaffrey. 9 rushes, 26 yards, 1 touchdown. He had 7 receptions for 72 yards. A normal day for Christian McCaffrey at the office. But His season statistics are as follows: 1,387 rushing yards, 15 touchdowns with 116 receptions for 1,005 yards and 4 receiving touchdowns. Christian McCaffrey becomes the third player to join the 1,000 club. That's 1,000 rushing yards, 1,000 receiving yards. Roger Craig did it in 1985. Marshall Faulk did it in 1999. Also, McCaffrey ends the season with 2,392 yards from scrimmage. That's the third most yards from scrimmage in a season. So historic stuff from Christian McCaffrey, despite the fact that the Carolina Panthers were somewhat just not a good football team this year.
Yeah, they weren't, but it is good to see someone like Christian McCaffrey just stand alone kind of on that team. And those are some impressive stats. He had a great season. I'd much rather be in the 1,000 club than the 30-30 club.
Yeah, absolutely. No joke there.
But yeah, I mean, that's a heck of a season for him. And,
I mean, not to mention too, with their head coaching position being open, and just thinking to yourself, I mean, they have Cam Newton under contract right now for, I believe, one more season, but you could potentially have Christian McCaffrey at your disposal. I mean, that's got to be pretty attractive.
No, absolutely. 100%. That's a great player to have at your disposal.
Now, 2 more games to run through real quick. San Francisco defeats Seattle 26-21. A last-second stop at the 1-yard line clinches the NFC West in the first seed and the NFC for Seattle, or for San Francisco, I apologize. Seattle running back Marshawn Lynch, his first game in 14 months, 12 rushes, 34 yards, and a touchdown. Also, Tennessee defeats Houston 35-14. Tennessee clinches the 6th seed in the AFC. Tennessee running back Derrick Henry clinches the NFL rushing title after a 32-carry, 211-yard, 3-touchdown day, which brings me, Lewis, to the second of the 3 big things this week, a regular season stats rewind offensively. Tampa Bay quarterback Jameis Winston, 5,109 passing yards on the season. He's the only quarterback in the National Football League this year to throw for 5,000-plus yards. Baltimore quarterback Lamar Jackson, 36 passing touchdowns, led the league. Tennessee running back Derrick Henry, 1,540 rushing yards. He also tied for the league lead with 16 rushing touchdowns with Green Bay running back Aaron Jones. New Orleans wide receiver Michael Thomas had an incredible year, 149 receptions, an NFL record, and 1,725 receiving yards. Also, Detroit wide receiver Kenny Golladay had 11 receiving touchdowns to lead the league in that stat. Now, defensively, the 3 big stats we're going to talk about here. First off, Seattle linebacker Bobby Wagner, 159 total tackles. Tampa Bay linebacker Shaquille Barrett had 19.5 sacks.
That's a lot of sacks.
That's a lot of sacks, absolutely. And then with 6 interceptions, we have a 3-way tie. New England cornerback Stephon Gilmore, Minnesota safety Anthony Harris, and Buffalo cornerback Tre'Davious White. They all ended up with 6 interceptions on the season. Now, Lewis, not much more to say about those stats. The numbers are the numbers, but what we're going to do here is now look ahead to the other news, the Black Monday edition, the third of the 3 big things this week. We're going to start off with the biggest news story of the week because it's the most fluid news story of the week, because it seems like this team here appears to be doing all of their dirty work out in the open. Freddie Kitchens fired after 1 season in Cleveland, 6-10 record. Statement from the owner said, quote, "We thank Freddie for his hard work and commitment to this organization." Here's the kicker, "but did not see the success or opportunities for improvement to move forward with him as our head coach." Ouch. That one hurts.
Yeah, that's painful right there.
That's like your boss saying you're not doing great, but also I don't see any potential in you being any better than bad, so get the hell out of here. Also,
yeah, that's the thing. You gave him 1 season. You can't even really solidify yourself as a head coach in 1 season.
Excuse me. I mean, there was a lot we saw early enough in the season, and it kind of felt like Freddie Kitchens got the job because of how he worked with Baker Mayfield, and rightfully so. I mean, at this point, it seems like Freddie Kitchens is a good assistant, but he clearly doesn't have the potential to be a head coach right now, at least. And good on Cleveland to at least recognize that and not kick the can down the road 3 or 4 years and let him try to figure it out. They realized, hey, this guy doesn't have it, whatever. So at this point, looking at the Cleveland Browns, man, they are a freaking mess. They mutually part ways with John Dorsey, their general manager, after ownership approached him about a potential power restructure, and that was clearly not something Dorsey was reportedly interested in. Also, reports have Browns chief strategy officer Paul DePodesta leading the search for a new head coach, which is not a bad idea because Paul DePodesta actually ends up he's a pretty smart guy, knows what he's doing, at least with baseball, the baseball side of things. So I'm sure the football side of things, it's not been too great for him in Cleveland, but if he gets more power, maybe he can help them turn things around. Now, also, ESPN's Jeff Darlington tweeted, quote, "Here's an early prediction for how everything shakes out in Cleveland. Paul DePodesta winds up with more power, which would make sense with the restructure request to John Dorsey. He said no. Andrew Berry becomes GM, Kevin Stefanski as the head coach. Now, Andrew Berry, the VP of football operations for the Philadelphia Eagles, and Kevin Stefanski is the offensive coordinator for the Minnesota Vikings. But, Lewis, it gets better. Here's a hypothetical idea that's rolling around on Twitter through a lot of football minds, not just, you or I making stuff up, see if it sticks. This is actually football writers kind of talking out loud saying, so think about this. If Minnesota doesn't win or exits the playoffs early, Mike Zimmer, head coach, despite the fact he's had success in Minnesota, he has 1 year left on his contract. So there's a potential that the Vikings could fire Mike Zimmer to then promote and keep Kevin Stefanski, make him their head coach of the Vikings because they feel that high about him. They don't want to lose him. On the other hand, the Dallas Cowboys are reportedly monitoring Mike Zimmer's status because they would be interested in bringing him to Dallas as their head coach. So again, a big house of cards. And this is why I think I like the silly season in football, because it's if this, then that, then this, then that type of thing. And it's pretty wild at this point.
Yeah, no, it really is. It'll be interesting to see how everything shakes out. If Dallas is monitoring Zimmer's status, then they may wait to make a decision on Jason Garrett a little longer, which was terrible. Just let the guy go.
And from what I'm real quick too, I'm reading something from Charles Robinson, a senior NFL reporter for Yahoo, just writing a little more here. He's talking about assistant GM Elliot Wolfe, who used to work for I believe the Green Bay Packers, which is why some people may say maybe he becomes the GM and Mike McCarthy is the head coach because they would have a good rapport there. It says here that from what he's been told, Elliot Wolfe has a good chance to remain. It says here that VP of Player Personnel Alonzo Highsmith has not been fired, but maybe headed to the University of Miami. But then here's a good little nugget. Part of why Dorsey firing happened beyond Kitchen's failure is owner Jimmy Haslam realized he can't run an organization with football and analytics being opposing forces in any way. Obviously, we've heard that John Dorsey, not a huge fan of analytics, but Jimmy Haslam realizing that analytics are important to win in football because all the smart organizations have done it. So why can't they do it? It says here that that Haslam tried to force people to work together and it failed. He now needs everyone unified from day one in 2020, which again seems to lend some credence to the fact that Paul DePodesta is the one that is running the coaching search here in Cleveland. It says here too, while DePodesta's, and this is all happening it's like literally 54 seconds ago, stuff's rolling in here. While DePodesta's title hasn't changed, he's clearly the number one under Haslam in this coaching search. If that remains the case, it's going to impact the candidate field. Josh McDaniels, for example, is going to be a problematic target if DePodesta remains in a power position. So yeah, that again, it could be a interesting power play in Cleveland, but then again, if you get the right people, if you find the right people, it may all work out in the long run.
Yeah, we're just going to have to just.
I mean, I'm sorry. There's a lot to unpack there, but there's a lot happening.
There's a lot happening. We'll have to just, like I said, just monitor it, see where it goes. It'll be
absolutely.
Interesting to see how it all plays out.
We'll keep y'all posted on that stuff because this is the best. I eat this stuff right up. Moving over to the New York Giants here. Pat Shurmur fired after 2 seasons. He went 9-23. GM Dave Gettleman remains in his position. It's wild that Pat Shurmur coached the Giants and the Cleveland Browns and finished with a 9-23 record in both situations. Also, New York Giants quarterback Eli Manning, a pending unrestricted free agent, acknowledged that he likely is done with the organization, but not yet sure if he will retire. He said being a backup quarterback is, quote, no fun, and responded with, I quote, I doubt it, when asked if he would back up for another team. So again, Doesn't look like Eli Manning wants to return to the Giants because he doesn't want to be a backup quarterback, but he also could potentially retire, ending his, I guess, Hall of Fame career, despite the fact that he's, I think, 117, but he did beat Tom Brady twice in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, it's tough when you got 2 rings. You know what I'm saying?
Everybody who has 2 rings is a Hall of Famer. That's how it's always been.
Yeah, I don't.
It may take him some time to get in, but I think he'll end up getting in.
Maybe eventually. He needs to walk away. He proved he wasn't starter material anymore. He's getting older. Just walk away and go join your brother making commercials.
Hey, look at I'm fine with that. Speaking of the NFC East, Washington is hired Ron Rivera, ex-Carolina coach, to a 5-year deal. They fired team president Bruce Allen not a year too soon. He's been the succubus on that organization for quite a while. But also, it looks like at this point as well that Ron Rivera is either set to hire or has hired defensive coordinator Jack Del Rio to run that position in Washington, which will be huge because Jack Del Rio just may have a very talented pass rusher coming to him via the draft from Ohio State.
Washington needs to do something. They've been a dumpster fire for so long. Maybe this is the start of turning that franchise around.
I mean, it seems to me like they're at least, I would say, 2, 3, 4 years away from relevancy because you got to figure they got to figure out their quarterback. They got to build it up. They got to figure out what they're doing with the offensive line, build that up. They got to figure out what they're doing with the defense, build that back up. I think Ron Rivera coming to Washington is very much a culture driven decision as well because Ron Rivera, he was, I don't think he was loved by everybody in Carolina, but he was not hated by everybody in Carolina. He definitely had a way, he had a way about things in Carolina that really worked out. And for the longest time there, I mean, things were doing well, but it just came to the point where the message got stagnant and it was time to change things up a bit. And I think Ron Rivera will be a fine hire for Washington. I almost said we'll go from there, but that's not what I was trying to say. I think it'd be a good hire for Washington, but I do think it'll take a few years for them to get back to any sort of relevancy in the NFC East, let alone the NFL.
I agree with you there. 100%. I agree with you.
Now, the big one for you, Lewis, Dallas. Jason Garrett has not yet been fired, but it says they've said multiple sources have said his contract is unlikely to be renewed, which would end his 9.5 seasons with the franchise. He's 85 and 67. He also has 3 playoff appearances at 2-3 with that record. Now, I'm sitting here on Twitter, as I mentioned before the podcast, and some interesting news dropped within the last hour.
Okay.
A top quarterback prospect that Oklahoma had pulled, Brock Vandegrift, I believe is his name. He decommitted from Oklahoma within the last hour. Now, Rich Eisen from the NFL Network points out, he said there's got to be a reason for this long goodbye with Jason Garrett and Zero Leaks reporting on who Dallas is reporting or preparing to request permission to interview. And then he also points out he has a friend who says that losing that quarterback for Oklahoma is largely due to them being set at quarterback for a few years. But Brock Vandegrift did say, he told Sports Illustrated recently, he would decommit from Oklahoma if Lincoln Riley left for the National Football League. So, with that being said, maybe Lincoln Riley is headed to the Dallas Cowboys.
That'd be very interesting. I mean,
Lincoln Riley has had a way with quarterbacks recently. He has had Jalen Hurts this season. He had Kyler Murray last season. He had Baker Mayfield the year before that. 2 Heisman Trophy winners in the last 3 years.
Right.
Not bad at all. But I don't know if Lincoln Riley is going to make the jump. But Lewis, being the Oklahoma Sooners head coach, one of the most prestigious college sports or college football franchises of all time, and then you have the Dallas Cowboys calling you, I would presume that Lincoln Riley may want a little more power than a new coach might have, just because I know that there is, and this is just me surmising some things here from what I've seen. He knows how he wants to run things, and that's how he's done it in Oklahoma. That's how they've been successful. And if he wants to run that same type of deal in Dallas, if he were to come to Dallas, he would obviously need some sort of power or some sort of extra rope, I guess, to allow that to happen. But look, if Jerry Jones can get Lincoln Riley under contract with the Dallas Cowboys, that might be the hire of the offseason.
100%. I mean, if he can get Jerry Jones to guarantee that he's not going to meddle and let him actually run the team the way he wants to run the team, that could be huge. That could be big. I would be very interested in that.
Absolutely.
See if that actually happens.
Because you've got Dak Prescott, you've got Amari Cooper. Those are two big names in the offseason. I mean, I would have to think that they'll jump through any hoop, run through any wall to get Dak Prescott under contract.
Right.
But even again, if they lose Amari Cooper, you look at it this way: you've got a very attractive offense, a very attractive defense. I would have to think maybe aside from Cleveland. I mean, I don't think Cleveland is a on the field. I think Cleveland's probably the best job available because of all the talent that they have on the field, both offensively and defensively. But with the front office meddling, you don't know how things are going to end up working out because doesn't seem like anybody there has a clue of which direction they want to head in.
Right.
I mean, it's not that much better in Dallas, I don't think, because Jerry Jones is playing like a split personality. He's the owner, but he's also the GM. So sometimes he talks like the owner, sometimes he talks like the GM, but it always holds so much more weight. And do you really want to be a part of that circus if you don't do great? Because obviously there are a lot of expectations in Dallas, but I think if anybody's the man for the job right now, it's probably Lincoln Riley. And I would love to see it because, like I said, he's a young, talented coach. He's real smart. And I would love to see how that all works out.
Yeah, I will definitely be monitoring that situation.
I'm sure that would be very nice, right? Now, Jacksonville, we're going to move over to a couple teams, I should say, that aren't making changes and kind of head scratching in some way, shape, or form. Jacksonville, they will not fire their head coach, Doug Marrone. He's 22-28 with the Jaguars. I know that I've heard that Marrone has a very good relationship with the Khan family. And as Shad Khan's son, Tony Khan, starts to take over a little more power, he also really likes Doug Marrone. So I guess it makes sense that he would get another shot. But, oh boy, that leash has got to be very tight on Doug Marrone at this point because he has had, aside from that AFC Championship run, he's not had a great time in Jacksonville.
No. I would agree that the rope's probably very tight. It's going to be, if he doesn't produce next season, I can see them finally letting him go.
I think so. I think that's fair. That's fair to say for sure. Now, Chicago making a ballsy move. The Bears, I should say, Chicago Bears. GM Ryan Pace confirms Mitchell Trubisky will indeed be quarterback one heading into the 2020 season. They also did fire offensive coordinator Mark Helfrich, an offensive line coach, a tight end coach, and an assistant special teams coach. So the leash gets a little tighter around the head coach's collar because obviously once you start to fire assistants, who's next? Probably you. But Mitchell Trubisky, not great. He regressed last season. He played one more game than 2018 season. 15 games, but his record was worse at 8-7. His completion percentage was worse at 63.2%. He had less passing yards, 3,138, fewer touchdowns, 17, and less yards per attempt at 6.1. So I'm not sure what the Bears are doing, but we do get I did find a great tweet from a Bears writer and a Bears fan, Jeremy Layton, at Jeremy Layton. The O is a 0 instead of it's LAYT0N on Twitter. He says, Bears GM Ryan Pace remains committed to Trubisky, says he will be the starter in 2020, wants to see, quote, growth and more, quote, consistency after 40 starts. I remain wanting to put my fist through the wall. And I would agree with that one, Jeremy, because the Bears defense has been great. The Bears offense has left a lot to be desired. And Mitchell Trubisky hasn't really done much to inspire any confidence in himself. So again, looking at that, now at this point, I don't really know how you can move forward and be confident in that decision. But I guess, hey, they're going all in. So I guess enjoy it, Bears fans.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens, especially going into the next season. If he's the starter and he doesn't show any growth, then maybe next year they'll be like, all right, time to move on.
Absolutely. I think that you gotta be ready to pull the trigger on that one because at this point, Mitchell Trubisky, not good. Now, our look ahead.
They can always look at Jameis Winston.
Our looking ahead at the playoffs now.
Playoffs.
With 17 weeks in the book, the regular season is done. We obviously know the playoff picture now. The AFC as is follows 1-6. Baltimore, Kansas City, New England, Houston, Buffalo, and Tennessee. In the NFC 1-6, it's San Francisco, Green Bay, New Orleans, Philadelphia, Seattle, and Minnesota. So, Lewis, wild card weekend as is follows. Baltimore, Kansas City, San Francisco, and Green Bay, they have a bye week. Buffalo and Houston, they open up wild card weekend Saturday, January 4th at 4:35 p.m. And an interesting Instagram post from DeAndre Hopkins on this New Year's Day. He posted a photo of him catching a pass over Tre'Davious White, Bills cornerback, and says 2020 mood. So I have to presume that is some sort of bulletin board material that I don't think that the Texans would want to have be put out. But hey, I digress. But Buffalo, Houston, we talked about it on Trust the Podcast. I think Buffalo has as good of a shot as anybody to beat Houston and move on in the playoffs here.
They do. They have a good defense. Their offense has done well enough to win them games. However, I think the Texans are going to win.
That's okay. Tennessee, New England, Saturday, January 4th at 8:15 p.m. I think that Tennessee can give the Patriots a run for their money. But for me, when the Patriots play at home in the playoffs, whether it's the wild card weekend, divisional championship rounds, whatever it may be, it's hard for me to bet against the Patriots at home. I think Tennessee might be very pleased to be there, but I do think the Patriots will probably take this game.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think they will too. I think, like you said, I think the Titans will give them some fits, but I think the Patriots are going to move on.
Now over to the NFC, they hold Sunday, January 5th at 1:05 p.m. Minnesota takes on the New Orleans Saints. I don't think I would presume, as you put it, Minnesota may give New Orleans some fits offensively, but I think New Orleans is too good all around to be stopped by the Vikings, and I've got the Saints moving ahead here in this game.
At the beginning of the season, I picked the Vikings to make the Super Bowl. I was wrong. They're not going to make the Super Bowl. I do not believe they're going to beat the Saints either.
Now, looking at the other game, Seattle-Philadelphia, which is kind of a BS game because Seattle's very good, but they have to travel to Philadelphia to take on the NFC East winning Philadelphia Eagles Sunday, January 5th at 4:40 p.m. I don't think this one will be much of a matchup. I've got the Seahawks taking the Eagles down in, I wouldn't say relatively easy fashion, but I don't think the game will be as close as many think.
I agree. I believe the Seahawks are going to move on as well.
Now, our playoff predictions, Lewis, brought to you here thanks to playoffpredictors.com, and they're not sponsoring us. I'm just saying thank you because their website is what we've been using all season long. If you go to their website, playoffpredictors.com, you can support their Patreon to help them keep their website up and running. What they do is fantastic. It's a lot of fun to get lost there as well. As I mentioned, I have the Patriots over the Titans, the Bills over the Texans, Saints over the Vikings, and Seahawks over the Eagles, which then I would have Ravens, Bills, Patriots, Chiefs in the AFC, 49ers, Seahawks, Saints, and Packers in the NFC. So, Lewis, I'll ask you first. Your divisional matchups, who do you have winning, moving on to the conference championships?
I have Baltimore versus Houston. I'm going to go with Baltimore. I don't even think it's going to be, much of a – well, I think it'll be a good game, but Baltimore is going to come out on top. I have the Patriots versus the Kansas City Chiefs. I think that's going to be a great game. I have the Chiefs moving on to face the Ravens in the AFC Championship game. And then in the NFC, I believe, Seattle versus San Fran is going to be an incredible, incredible matchup. They're 1-1 against each other in the regular season this year. The first game went to overtime, and the second game was very close. My head is telling me to go with San Fran, but I can't do it, so I'm going to go with Seattle. I think Seattle's going to move on to the NFC Championship game. And then I have the Saints moving on to face the Green Bay Packers. I don't think the Packers can deal with the Saints. So I'm going to have the Saints moving on to face Seattle.
That's fair. For me, I have the Ravens over the Bills, despite the fact that the Bills have faced the Ravens earlier this year. They held Lamar Jackson in check, which we've talked about weeks ago on Trust the Podcast. I think the Ravens are just too good of a team to be held down there. Although they have been recovering from the flu, maybe that will help them, the Bills, a little. But at that point, it'll be 2 weeks out, I believe. So we'll see how that works out. And then I have the Chiefs over the Patriots. New England has to travel to Arrowhead. Good luck with that one. I definitely think it'll be Kansas City and Baltimore in the AFC Championship game. Then the NFC, I've got the 49ers over the Seahawks. They continue to find ways to win against good teams and bad teams. So at this point, I mean, it's hard for me to bet against San Francisco, but that game can certainly go either way. And then Saints and Packers, again, Lewis, I agree with you. I don't know if the Packers can hold back the New Orleans Saints and their offense. And I really want to see the 49ers and Saints rematch in the NFC Championship game. So I'm going Saints and 49ers in the NFC, Chiefs and Ravens, like I said, in the AFC. Now, who do you have going to the Super Bowl, Lewis?
Baltimore Ravens versus the Kansas City Chiefs, I think, is going to be an absolute incredible game. I had the Chiefs winning the Super Bowl at the beginning of the year. Just like I was wrong with the Minnesota Vikings, I don't think they're going to make the Super Bowl. I think the Ravens are going to eke it out. I think they're going to beat the Chiefs and move on to the Super Bowl. So then that leaves, in my bracket, the Seahawks versus the Saints. I think this will be a great game, but I see the Saints going to the Super Bowl, so I have the Ravens versus the Saints.
And who do you have winning the game, and what's your final score?
I'm going to say that the Ravens are going to win the Super Bowl this year, and it's going to be a shootout. So the final score will probably be something like 32-27.
That's fair. For me, I have the Ravens over the Chiefs again. It's going to be very hard to stop that Baltimore Ravens team, I think. And that Chiefs defense, they've been good, but I don't think they'll be good enough to hold Lamar Jackson down. If Mark Ingram is hurt, obviously that can hurt the Ravens. I know he's got an issue with his calf. I didn't mention it against the Bills because I don't think that'll be much of a problem. But again, I certainly think that that Baltimore can take Kansas City. In the NFC, I had the 49ers beating the Seahawks. I've got the 49ers beating the Saints. I think both those the games will end up being crazy shootouts. And I've got a Super Bowl rematch of the 49ers and Ravens from years ago, but also from earlier this year, which was an incredible game. But this time I have the 49ers getting revenge on the Ravens, winning 21-17. Again, I think it'll be a low-scoring game like the first matchup was, but I feel like the 49ers have tape on Lamar Jackson. I mean, obviously the Ravens know what the 49ers will do now because they've seen it firsthand, but that game during the regular season was incredible. And I think that another Super Bowl matchup with 49ers and Ravens would be incredible, and we'd be super lucky to see it. I certainly think, too, that as long as the 49ers make it deep, all of their games will be a blast to watch. They are so much fun. They are so fluid offensively. And that's kind of why I think that they're going to win. I mean, they just have it. They have the it factor this year, it seems like, from the first week to now. And we'll see how it works out. But like I said again, I've got the San Francisco 49ers beating the Baltimore Ravens 21-17 in the Super Bowl.
Either way, it's going to be interesting. You know, we both got great Super Bowl matchups. It'll be fun to watch.
Absolutely.
I obviously, as a Dallas Cowboy fan, I don't want the 49ers to win because I don't want 3 teams to have 6 Super Bowl rings before the Cowboys get a 6th one.
God forbid. God forbid someone tries to rain in your parade there, bub.
That's what I'm saying, man.
Well, good news is that the playoffs start here in a few days. It is Wednesday, New Year's Day again. Happy New Year. Happy 2020. We will be back next week to talk about the divisional matchups, what we saw, what we liked, what we didn't like. We'll have the latest on the coaching updates. Hopefully we'll have some more either coaches fired or we'll have some coaches being hired or moving around or whatever it may be. Lewis, I do appreciate you taking the time today, joining me on the podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And you can follow Lewis on Twitter at MRLG Perez. I am at Wolfe BLTD. As always, we are better live than dead.
You're not.
We will catch you sometime very soon. Thanks again for tuning in, everybody, and enjoy the playoffs.
Peace.
The preceding presentation has been brought to you by the Gear Network.